I stood frozen as Iris swept into my workspace, her entourage of executives trailing behind her like obedient ducklings. 23 years old with a business degree still warm from the printer, while I'd spent double that time building our client portfolio. Everyone, I'd like to introduce Mona, who'll be handling our legacy accounts, she announced, gesturing toward me as if presenting an outdated office printer. From now on, she reports directly to me. The room went silent. Nobody looked at me, not Trent from legal, not Kip from accounting, not even Darlene who'd shared lunch with me every Wednesday for a decade. They studied their shoes, tablet screens, anything but my face. We need fresh energy in the European markets, our CEO said, his hand on Iris's shoulder. Mona can help you understand our history while you lead us forward. I was being turned into history while still breathing. The corner desk will be yours, Iris told me, pointing to a cramped space near the supply closet. I need this office cleared by lunch. My office. My space that had witnessed countless late nights and breakthroughs. The wall still displayed the thank you letter from our biggest client after I'd saved their campaign during a natural disaster. Understood, I replied, my voice steadier than my hands. 3 hours later, I watched maintenance workers carry my achievement plaques in a cardboard box, while Iris directed the placement of abstract art pieces on my former walls. The bulky desk goes too, she instructed them. It's positively ancient, the desk my team had gifted me after our department won Company Achievement of the Year. My new workspace had a wobbly chair and computer that wheezed when starting up. My phone rang. Howie, my direct report for 8 years. Mona, I'm sorry, but Iris has called a team meeting in the Willow Room. When? Right now. She said it's just for the team leads. I was being excluded from a meeting with my own team. No problem, I lied. After hanging up, I noticed an email from Iris to the entire department. Growth Strategy Implementation. Moving beyond outdated methods. Attached was a 16-page presentation. I opened it and felt my breath catch. These weren't just similar ideas to what I'd proposed 6 months ago. These were my exact proposals, down to the specific market penetration targets for Portugal and Greece. The same proposals our CEO had deemed too ambitious when I presented them. A sticky note appeared on my desk at 4:30. My office, 5 p.m. sharp. Iris. I found her leaning against my old desk, tapping away on her phone. Sit, she said without looking up. I remained standing. She finally glanced up. Your European strategy proposal was well received in the executive meeting today. You mean my European strategy? Her smile didn't waver. Your research was useful groundwork, certainly. But groundwork isn't architecture, Mona. I've modernized and elevated your basic concepts into something actionable. You copied my work, word for word in some sections. That's a serious accusation, she replied, setting her phone down. Especially from someone in your position. My position? People who've been at one company too long often grow. Territorial, change-resistant. The CEO understands this transition might be difficult for you. Is that why you excluded me from my own team meeting today? She sighed theatrically. I needed candid feedback about departmental leadership. People aren't always comfortable speaking honestly with their former supervisor present. The implication hit like a physical punch. She'd been gathering complaints about me. We're restructuring the department next month, she continued. Some roles will be eliminated, others will evolve. Your future here depends entirely on your ability to adapt. The threat was unmistakable. Is there anything else? I asked quietly. Yes, the Winterman presentation tomorrow. I'll handle it. The Winterman Group, my client for 16 years. Their CEO had specifically requested me for their annual review. Oliver specifically asked for me to present. I spoke with Oliver this morning. He understands the new direction. She was systematically stripping away everything I'd built. My role, my relationships, my reputation. That's all, she said, attention back on her phone. I walked out, passing the glass-walled conference room where my team still sat in their meeting. They fell silent as I passed, eyes darting away. Whatever Iris had told them had changed something fundamental. On my cramped desk, a new email arrived from HR. Performance Improvement Plan. Confidential. A formal PIP. The first step toward termination. The document listed resistance to new leadership and territorial behavior. I'd given 2 decades to this company, postponed having children, worked through pneumonia twice, skipped my grandfather's funeral to save a key account. Now I was being pushed out by someone who'd built her entire strategy on my work. I shut down my computer, gathered my bag, and left without saying goodbye to anyone. In my car, I sat silently for 20 minutes, staring at nothing, a strange calm replacing the initial shock. They thought they were watching a woman being gradually erased. They expected tears, outbursts, a resignation letter. They had no idea who they were dealing with. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't vent to friends or family. Instead, I opened my personal laptop and began working. Not on my resume, not on a complaint to HR, on a file, a very specific file that would change everything. Wait, before I tell you what happened next, I want to thank you for starting this journey with me. If you're feeling the punch of injustice already, you might want to like this video and subscribe. Trust me, what comes next is something you won't want to miss. The quiet revenge of a woman who'd been underestimated for the last time. My name is Mona Teller, and until 3 weeks ago, I was the Senior Director of International Growth at a marketing company that had just merged with our biggest competitor. The merger had brought changes, certainly, but none of us expected the executive team to place a newcomer directly above me with no transition period. I joined the company straight out of college, back when we occupied half a floor in a downtown building with questionable heating. We now had offices in 11 countries. I'd personally opened 7 of them. My team respected me not because I demanded it, but because I'd earned it. When Bella's mother was diagnosed with cancer, I rearranged her entire work schedule so she could drive her to treatments. When Penn's apartment flooded, I helped him find temporary housing. When Howie struggled with his first major client presentation, I stayed late for a week straight until he could deliver it flawlessly. I knew their children's names, their anniversaries, their dreams beyond our company walls. Iris knew none of this. To her, they were resources to be optimized, pieces on a chessboard to be moved according to her grand strategy. During her second week, she called Howie into her office. He emerged an hour later, avoiding eye contact with me. The next day, he presented his new approach to our Nordic markets at the department meeting, an approach I'd been privately mentoring him on for months. The same pattern repeated with Bella and her digital architecture improvements. With Penn and his client retention model, one by one, my team's collaborative projects with me were being reframed as individual breakthroughs under Iris's inspiring leadership. She asked about your management style. Darlene whispered during our now awkward Wednesday lunch. If you micromanage, take credit for others' work, resist innovation. What did you say? I asked. Darlene looked down at her salad. I tried to be diplomatic, but Mona, she records everything. She had her phone on the table, recording our entire conversation. Iris wasn't just rewriting the present, she was revising the past. By week 3, my team stopped coming to me with questions. Emails went unanswered. Invitations to client calls disappeared from my calendar. I was being ghosted within my own department. The final blow came when Oliver from Winterman Group called me directly, confused about why I wouldn't be leading their account anymore. Iris explained you're taking on strategic planning instead of client-facing roles, he said. After 16 years? Without even a handover meeting? It was a sudden change, I replied carefully. Well, we specifically requested you in our contract renewal. If you're not involved, we'll need to reconsider our options. When I raised this with our CEO, he seemed distracted, preoccupied. Iris has some innovative approaches to the Winterman portfolio, he said. Give her a chance, Mona. Change can be positive. That evening, I watched through the conference room windows as Iris presented my European strategy to the executive team. My slides, my data, my conclusions, all with her name on the cover page. The executives nodded approvingly. Our CEO actually applauded at the end. I should have felt anger, but instead, a strange clarity washed over me. I'd been playing by rules that no longer applied, following a social contract that Iris had never signed. It was time to change the game entirely. I went home and pulled out my external hard drive, the one where I'd backed up every project, every email, every presentation for the past 15 years. Not for this moment specifically, but because I'd always believed in protecting institutional knowledge. What I found as I searched through those archives stunned even me. I worked through the night, gathering, connecting, analyzing. By morning, I had compiled something that made my hands tremble as I saved the file. As I drove to work, I realized Iris had made a critical mistake. She assumed my power came from my title, my office, my direct reports. She thought that by taking those away, she'd neutralized me. She hadn't realized my real power came from 2 decades of watching, listening, and remembering. from thousands of relationships built on trust rather than intimidation. From knowing exactly how our company functioned at every level, knowledge no org chart could capture. I arrived early, before the receptionist, before the cleaning crew finished. I placed a single manila folder on Iris's desk with a simple note, "For your review, historical growth, strategy outcomes." Then I left for my 8 a.m. client call, the one remaining meeting still on my calendar. When I returned at 10:30, something had clearly happened. People huddled in small groups, conversations stopping abruptly as I passed. Security guards stood outside the executive wing. Darlene hurried over to me, eyes wide. "What did you do?" "I shared some historical context," I replied. "Iris ran screaming into the CEO's office 20 minutes ago. Then security came. They're all in there now, the entire executive team." I nodded calmly and headed to my small desk. "Aren't you worried?" Darlene asked, following me. "About what?" "About," she gestured vaguely toward the executive offices. "No," I said simply. "I'm not worried at all." At noon, an email arrived from our CEO's assistant. "Meeting requested. Executive conference room. Immediate." The walk to the executive floor felt surreal. Eyes followed me, some curious, others fearful. Whatever was happening had rippled through the entire office. I found our CEO Gerald seated at the head of the table, flanked by our legal counsel and HR director. Iris was nowhere to be seen. "Sit down, Mona," Gerald said, his expression unreadable. I chose a seat directly across from him, placing my hands calmly on the table. "The file you left for Iris," he began. "Where did you get that information?" "From our company archives," I replied, "plus publicly available financial records." The legal counsel, a stern woman named Wilma, leaned forward. "You've made extremely serious allegations." "I haven't made allegations," I corrected her. "I simply compiled data. The patterns speak for themselves." Gerald rubbed his temples. "You're claiming Iris deliberately implemented strategies at her previous company that led to their collapse, and now she's replicating those same strategies here." "The data supports that conclusion, yes." "That's absurd," Wilma interjected. "Why would anyone deliberately sabotage their own employer?" I met her gaze steadily. 3 months before her previous company declared bankruptcy, Iris received a substantial payment from an investment group that later acquired their client list for pennies on the dollar. The same investment group that now owns 30% of our company following the merger. Silence fell over the room. "You understand what you're implying," Gerald said quietly. "I'm not implying anything. I'm showing you numbers, dates, and transactions that exist on public record." The HR director cleared her throat. "Iris claims you're retaliating because of the performance improvement plan, that you fabricated this conspiracy theory." I opened my laptop. "Would you like to see the original sources?" "I've indexed everything." Gerald's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then stood abruptly. "Wait here." When the door closed behind the three of them, I remained perfectly still. Through the glass wall, I could see them huddled with several executives I didn't recognize, likely from our parent company. 20 minutes passed before Gerald returned alone, looking 10 years older. "Iris has been suspended pending investigation," he said, sinking into his chair. "The merger oversight committee is flying in tonight." "I see." He studied me with new eyes. "You've been with us for 20 years. 22, actually. Why didn't you come to me directly with this information?" I considered my answer carefully. Would you have believed me? Over the rising star who promised to double our European market share in 6 months? His silence was answer enough. "You authorized her to place me on a performance improvement plan after 2 decades of exemplary reviews," I continued. "You allowed her to dismantle my team without consultation. You applauded when she presented my strategies as her own." He winced. You thought she represented the future, and I was part of the past." I finished for him. "That's human nature, Gerald. We're dazzled by novelty. What do you want, Mona?" "Excuse me? To make this right, what do you want? Your old position back? Iris's job?" I almost laughed. "I don't want her job." "Then what?" "I want respect. Not just for me, but for every person who builds something valuable in this company. I want leadership that values institutional knowledge alongside innovation. I want credit given where it's due." Gerald nodded slowly. "That's reasonable. And I want Oliver's account back today, before their contract reconsideration deadline." "Done." I stood to leave, but Gerald stopped me. "The file. How long have you been working on it?" "I haven't been working on it at all," I replied. "I simply pay attention. I always have." As I left the executive floor, My phone chimed with messages from team members who'd suddenly remembered my existence. I ignored them all. At my desk, I found Darlene waiting. Security took Iris's laptop, she whispered, and they're scanning her emails. What's happening? A correction, I said simply. By evening, Iris's name had been removed from the company directory. Her office, my former office, sat empty, the abstract art already gone from the walls. At home that night, I poured a glass of wine and finally allowed myself to process the day's events. My hands shook slightly as the adrenaline ebbed. My phone rang, an unknown number. Hello? Is this Mona Teller? A woman's voice, unfamiliar. Yes, this is Charlotte Weber, chairperson of the Merger Oversight Committee. I'd like to discuss your findings in person tomorrow morning. My stomach tightened. Of course. I should inform you that Iris has retained legal counsel. She's claiming wrongful termination and defamation. There it was, the counterattack. Of course Iris wouldn't go quietly. I understand, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. The information you compiled is concerning, but her legal team is questioning your methods and motives. Everything in that file can be independently verified. So you say. Charlotte's tone cooled. We'll need to examine this thoroughly. In the meantime, I've instructed Gerald to place you on administrative leave. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Administrative leave? On what grounds? It's standard procedure during an investigation of this nature. We need to ensure there's no perception of conflict while we review both sides. Both sides. As if this were a simple disagreement between colleagues. I see, I managed. We'll expect you at 9 tomorrow. Please bring all relevant materials. After hanging up, I sat motionless, staring at the wall. Administrative leave. The same status as Iris. In one swift move, they'd equalized us. Accuser and accused. My doorbell rang, startling me. Through the peephole, I saw Howie shifting nervously on my porch. I should have stood up for you, he blurted when I opened the door. We all should have. I let him in without comment. Is it true? He asked, following me to the kitchen. About Iris sabotaging her last company? You tell me, I replied. You worked with her presentations. Did anything strike you as odd about her growth projections? He looked down. The Nordic market targets. They're impossible without sacrificing our long-term client relationships. I tried to tell her, but she said you'd made us too cautious, too comfortable with modest growth. And what did you think? I thought. He hesitated. I thought maybe she was right. That maybe you had become too conservative. His honesty stung, but I appreciated it. The Oversight Committee is coming tomorrow, I told him. I've been placed on administrative leave, same as Iris. His eyes widened. That's insane. After what you uncovered? They're treating it as a personal dispute, her word against mine. But the evidence? Evidence can be interpreted different ways, especially when one party has powerful connections. Howie's expression hardened. Tell me what to do. How can I help? I studied him, his earnest face, his genuine distress. He'd abandoned me when Iris arrived, yes, but he'd also been the first to return. Why did you come here tonight, Howie? Because I was wrong. Because we all were. And because I've worked with you for 8 years. I know who you really are. I nodded slowly. Then that's what I need. People who know who I really am. The Oversight Committee meeting the next morning was held in our largest conference room. When I arrived, I found not just Charlotte Weber and the executives, but nearly 20 people, including Howie, Bella, Penn, and other team members. Charlotte, a sharp-featured woman in her 60s, began without pleasantries. Miss Teller, we've reviewed your file on Iris Palmer. Her legal representation has provided a response claiming you've misrepresented data to create a false narrative due to personal animosity. Beside her sat a polished man in an expensive suit, clearly Iris's lawyer. He smiled thinly at me. Furthermore, Charlotte continued, they've submitted evidence that you've been resistant to necessary changes, underperforming in your role, and attempting to undermine new leadership. My heart sank. Iris had prepared for this possibility, had been building a case against me from day one. Before we proceed with your response, Charlotte said, I should inform you that Iris has offered to drop potential legal action if you retract your claims and resign immediately. The lawyer slid a document across the table, a resignation letter, already prepared. The room went silent, all eyes on me. I looked at the paper, then at the faces around the table. Gerald avoiding my gaze, Charlotte watching coolly, Howie and my team members looking pale and worried. My hand reached for the document. I picked up the resignation letter, feeling the weight of every gaze in the room. The expensive stationery felt heavy in my hands as I slowly scanned the document. "This is quite thorough," I remarked, my voice steady despite the hammering of my heart. "Prepared in advance, I assume?" The lawyer nodded. "We wanted to make this transition as smooth as possible." "Smooth," I repeated. "For whom exactly?" Charlotte cleared her throat. "Miss Teller, I understand this is difficult, but actually it's not difficult at all," I interrupted, placing the resignation letter back on the table. "I won't be signing this." The lawyer's practiced smile faltered. "I strongly advise you to reconsider. Miss Palmer's counter-evidence is substantial." I folded my hands. "I look forward to reviewing it. All of it." Charlotte nodded to an assistant who distributed thick folders to everyone present. I opened mine to find dozens of pages, emails taken out of context, performance metrics selectively presented, statements from team members that had clearly been carefully edited. "As you can see," the lawyer said, "Miss Palmer has documented a pattern of resistance and underperformance that predates her arrival. Your file was merely retaliatory." I flipped through the pages slowly, nodding as if considering their weight. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out my own stack of folders, one for each person at the table. "What's this?" Charlotte asked as I passed them around. "Context," I replied simply. The room fell silent as they began to read. I had prepared these folders all night, with Howie's help. They contained the complete versions of the emails Iris had excerpted, the full performance metrics showing our department's consistent growth, and most importantly, notarized statements from team members who had come to my home after Howie spread the word. Bella was the first to speak. She told me Mona was being pushed into early retirement, that I should distance myself if I wanted to advance. Penn nodded. She said the same to me, that there was a confidential performance issue with Mona that she couldn't discuss, but we should align with new leadership. She played us against each other, Howie added, told each of us that the others had concerns about Mona's management. The lawyer's face reddened. "These statements are clearly coerced. They're notarized," I cut in. "Each one given freely, with witnesses present." Charlotte was studying the folders intently, her expression unreadable. "This still doesn't address Miss Palmer's core claim, that your file on her previous company is a vindictive fabrication." "No, it doesn't," I agreed calmly. "For that, we need outside verification." I stood and walked to the door, opening it to reveal a man in his 50s, wearing a visitor badge. "This is Edward Torres," I introduced him, "former chief financial officer at Iris's previous company." The lawyer jumped to his feet. "This is outrageous! We weren't informed of additional witnesses." Edward took a seat beside me. "I was terminated 3 months before the company collapsed, after raising concerns about suspicious strategy shifts. When Mona contacted me yesterday with the patterns she'd identified, I recognized them immediately." Charlotte leaned forward. "Mr. Torres, are you claiming Miss Palmer deliberately undermined your company?" "I'm stating that the strategies she advocated for were identical to the ones that bankrupted us, despite multiple warnings about their long-term consequences, and that she received a substantial consulting fee from the investment group that ultimately acquired our client list." The energy in the room shifted palpably. Gerald, who had been silent until now, turned to Charlotte. "We need to involve our financial compliance team immediately." The lawyer was frantically texting on his phone. "My client rejects these baseless accusations. Mr. Torres was terminated for performance issues. His testimony is clearly motivated by personal grievances." Edward smiled thinly. "Actually, I was offered a generous severance package in exchange for signing a non-disparagement agreement, which I did sign, regarding the company itself. But that agreement doesn't prevent me from discussing individual employees' actions, particularly when those actions might constitute financial impropriety." Charlotte turned to the lawyer. "Does Miss Palmer wish to respond to these allegations in person?" The lawyer's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression souring. "My client is unavailable at present." "I see." Charlotte closed her folder. "Then we'll proceed with a full investigation. Mr. Torres, we'll need a formal statement." "Already prepared," he replied, producing a sealed envelope, along with documentation of the timeline and transactions I observed. As the meeting adjourned, I remained seated, feeling strangely hollow despite the apparent vindication. This wasn't victory, not yet. Investigations could be derailed, evidence reinterpreted, narratives reshaped. Iris had powerful allies in the investment group. This was far from over. The room emptied until only Charlotte remained, studying me with new interest. 22 years at one company, she mused. "That's rare these days." "Loyalty used to matter," I replied. "It still does. to some of us. She gathered her papers. You'll remain on administrative leave during the investigation, but with full pay and benefits. Standard procedure. How long will the investigation take? Hard to say. These things can be complex. The unspoken message was clear. Powerful interests were involved. This could drag on for months, possibly years. I understand, I said, rising to leave. She stopped me at the door. Miss Teller, that file you compiled, how did you connect those particular dots? I considered my answer carefully. I've spent my career observing patterns in markets, in consumer behavior, in organizational dynamics. Some patterns only become visible with time and perspective, and patience, she added. Most people would have lashed out immediately when demoted. Reaction isn't the same as response, I replied. I chose to respond. 2 weeks passed. The investigation proceeded behind closed doors. I remained in limbo, neither terminated nor reinstated. My team sent regular updates. Iris had not returned, but neither had any formal announcements been made. The waiting was calculated, of course. A common corporate strategy. Delay until momentum fades, until righteous anger cools, until people simply move on. On Friday evening, as I tended to my neglected garden, my doorbell rang again. This time, it was Gerald. May I come in? He asked, looking uncomfortable on my porch. I led him to my kitchen without comment, offering coffee, which he declined. The investigation has stalled, he admitted, sitting at my counter. The investment group is applying significant pressure. I'm not surprised. They're threatening to withdraw financial support if we pursue this further. The board is concerned about stock implications. And there it was, the familiar calculus where ethics yielded to economics. So Iris gets away with it, I stated flatly. Gerald winced. She won't be returning to the company. That's something. While I remain on administrative leave until everyone forgets, then get quietly phased out. He couldn't meet my eyes. We're prepared to offer a generous severance package. Of course you are. Mona, please understand our position. The investment group controls 30% of our shares now. We can't simply ignore attempted corporate sabotage. Actually, you can. That's exactly what you're doing. He placed a folder on the counter. Another settlement offer, no doubt. The board meets Monday to finalize their decision, he said. This is the best I could negotiate for you. After he left, I didn't open the folder. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine and went back to my garden, losing myself in the simple, honest work of nurturing living things. My phone rang as dusk fell. Edward Torres. They're burying it, he said without preamble. I know. The investment group reached out to me, offered to refresh my recollection with a consulting contract. Are you taking it? He laughed bitterly. No, but it won't matter. They'll find someone who will. We sat in silence for a moment, two professionals watching justice slip away in real time. What will you do now? He finally asked. I looked at my garden, at the seeds I'd planted weeks ago, now pushing through the soil. I'm going to water my tomatoes, I replied, and then I'm going to finish what I started. Monday morning dawned clear and bright. Instead of staying home as instructed, I drove to the office, dressed in my most confident suit. The security guard smiled and waved me through. Evidently, no one had removed my access. The office was buzzing more than usual. People stopped talking when they saw me, eyes widening in surprise. I walked directly to the executive floor, where the board meeting would be held. Outside the boardroom, Charlotte was speaking quietly with Gerald, and several board members I recognized. Gerald spotted me first, his expression shifting from shock to alarm. Mona, you're not supposed to be here. I know, I replied calmly. But I thought the board should have complete information before their vote. Charlotte stepped forward. Miss Teller, while I respect your concern, this meeting is closed. Of course, I nodded. I just have one document to submit. I handed her a sealed envelope. This should clarify matters considerably. What is this? She asked, not opening it. The missing piece, I replied. The reason I was so certain about Iris's connections to the investment group. Gerald reached for the envelope. I'll make sure the board reviews it. Actually, I said, you should open it now. All of you. Something in my tone must have convinced them. Charlotte carefully broke the seal and removed a single page. The board members gathered around, reading over her shoulder. Their reactions told the story. Widened eyes, sharp intakes of breath, one man actually taking a step backward. Is this verified? Charlotte asked, her voice uncharacteristically shaky. Every detail, I confirmed. I've spent the past 2 weeks securing additional documentation. Gerald looked physically ill. Why didn't you present this initially? Because I needed to see how far certain parties would go to protect their interests. Now I know. Charlotte handed the document to an assistant. The board needs to review this immediately, in private. I nodded and turned to leave. Mona, Gerald called after me. Where are you going? I smiled for the first time in weeks. To clean out my desk. I won't be needing it anymore. As I walked away, I heard the boardroom door open and urgent voices calling for immediate legal counsel. By noon, the news had spread throughout the company. The investment group that had engineered our merger, the same group that had acquired Iris's previous company's client list, was actually a complex shell corporation, ultimately controlled by our main competitor. Iris hadn't been sabotaging her previous employer for personal gain. She'd been a planted operative executing a sophisticated corporate espionage strategy spanning years, designed to weaken and eventually acquire our client base through what appeared to be legitimate business failures. The evidence I'd uncovered didn't just implicate Iris. It revealed an entire network of placed executives across multiple companies, all working toward the same goal: the systematic dismantling of competitive barriers through manufactured failures disguised as market forces. My phone rang continuously. Reporters, board members, even regulatory officials. I declined all calls, focusing instead on packing my few remaining personal items. As I placed my coffee mug in a small box, Darlene appeared at my desk. The investment group's representatives just left in a hurry, she reported. Security escorted them out. I nodded, continuing to pack. Gerald's called an emergency all-staff meeting for 3 p.m., she continued. And there are people from the Securities Exchange Commission in the conference room. That was quick, I remarked. Mona, she hesitated. Everyone's saying you've saved the company, that you uncovered a conspiracy no one else saw. I closed my box. I just paid attention, Darlene. That's all. Are you really leaving? I picked up my box. My work here is done. As I walked toward the exit, my team gathered, forming an impromptu guard of honor. Howie stepped forward. Where will you go? He asked. I've received several interesting offers, I replied with a small smile. Turns out exposing corporate espionage makes one rather marketable. Will you at least stay for the meeting? Gerald wants to publicly acknowledge what you've done. I shook my head. Some acknowledgements come too late to matter. Outside, the spring air felt fresh and cleansing. I placed my box in my car and took one last look at the building where I'd spent most of my adult life. My revenge wasn't getting Iris fired or exposing the investment group's scheme. It wasn't even protecting the company from a hostile takeover disguised as a merger. My revenge was walking away on my own terms, with my reputation not just intact but enhanced. While Iris faced potential criminal charges and the investment group scrambled to avoid regulatory penalties, I had multiple job offers from companies who suddenly recognized the value of someone who noticed patterns others missed. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destroying your enemy, but rising so far above them that they become irrelevant to your story. If you've stayed with me through this journey, you know this wasn't just about workplace drama. It was about standing your ground when the world tries to erase you, about finding power in patience and observation. If my story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of quiet strength and strategic thinking. And let me know in the comments, what patterns have you noticed that others missed? Sometimes, that awareness is your greatest power.